Well, hi, everybody, Wes McDonald here, and I want to thank you for tuning in to another episode of TigerTube. And if you can't see me or my guest, that means you're listening to us in Tigerpaw Radio, so thank you for listening in. I'm really excited today. I've got two guests, which I've known for years in the channel. They're very closely involved with a lot of the dealers and a lot of the partners and the OEMs and vendors. They really are the premium media people in our space. They report on everything and they investigate everything that's happening in the channel. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to my guest today. So maybe Patricia Ames, I can get you to introduce yourself first.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Patricia Ames. I'm the president of BPO Media, which has a couple of print publications still. The Imaging Channel, which covers the office equipment industry, both hardware and software. Then we have another publication called Workflow Magazine, which talks a lot about digital transformation and business process automation. We have a couple of websites, we do custom research, we have one syndicated study a year, which we're fielding right now with the office equipment dealers. And we also have a division that deals with custom marketing. So that's kind of how our corporate overview looks. West asked me to talk about what makes me cool. And I will say that I'm not cool. but I do march to the beat of my own drummer. And so it's going to be probably pretty apparent as we go through this conversation. Thank you.
Well, that's great. And I appreciate you bringing the full drum kit. And without further ado, maybe Amy Weiss, you can introduce yourself for audience as well.
Sure. I am Amy Weiss, and I am glad I don't have to do the company overview because Patricia's already done that very nicely. For all of you who are not on video, you didn't see me nodding emphatically when she said she marched to the beat of her own drummer, but I did. But we do that at BPO Media. That's kind of our gig is we march to the beat of our own drummers. I have been in this industry, and I don't even know what we mean when we say this industry. It's just this, it almost needs the hand gesture with it because it's so broad at this point. But I have been in some form of this industry for about 20 years now. So I think I'm a lifer. But I've been writing and editing for much longer than that, over 30 years since I was in the womb, obviously, because I'm 31. So yeah, it's been a long road and it's been a lot of fun. And I think what's really exciting is seeing what's coming now because we've got some interesting stuff ahead of us.
Well, that's great. And I appreciate you both being on the show today. And one of the things that I found very cool, actually, you mentioned some of the publications that you do and your Workflow magazine, right? You guys were doing that before it was even a big thing, that you sort of sniffed that one out pretty early, right? Because I can remember when the publication first started and people saying, really, why are they doing that? They're not in that space, are they? Little did we know that this far down the road, as you say, yes, we actually are in this space, right? So what it means to be an office equipment dealer is certainly different than what it meant when you guys started that publication as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it is officially 9 years, right? Amy said it's really 10 years old because it takes at least 9 months to really birth a new publication. So the seeds of that were growing for quite a while with us as we planned and executed that launch. So thinking a decade ago, people did think we were a little crazy, but that happens from time to time. But we saw this. Originally, it was about channel convergence, right? And we knew that direction was going to at least broaden out, if not converge. And we wanted a home for both sides to be able to come to. And that was really the genesis of Workflow Magazine.
Yeah, and it's really interesting when you think that, obviously what you did. I love Wayne Gretzky's expression when he says you have to go where the puck is going to be, not where it is, right? That's how, you kind of, you excel, right? So clearly you guys did that. So congratulations on that. We have definitely been living through an interesting couple of years, right? And prior to recording, we were all, sharing some stories about travel and muscle memory for travel and going to shows and events and different things, right? So I wonder, before we get, into some of the future things, if you can maybe sort of share with me some of the lessons learned and some of the things that you've seen that have occurred over the last couple of years. We've gone through some changes that, quite frankly, are changes that are affecting the world, right? And Amy, maybe I'll get you to start.
Wow. I mean, we've seen so much, sometimes it's hard to remember. But I think the number one lesson that we've learned is that we can do this, whatever this is. We had to, and we as a industry, but also everybody had to rapidly adapt. Everybody's seen that cartoon probably now with the big wrecking ball of COVID-19 coming, bashing the wall in on slow plans for digital transformation. We've seen companies make extraordinary adaptations to accommodate what was necessary with the work from home movement. And, there's been a lot of forces at work. And I think we've come through it really well, all things considered. It's been a struggle. But I think we've proven time and again that we're, as an industry, that we're very adaptable.
I love that answer, and I'm with you, right? Because I know that there are those out there that feel that the Office Equipment Channel is full of dinosaurs, right? That we're kind of not capable of adapting to change. And then when I look at it myself, I think back to starting off with typewriters, and then getting into standalone copiers, and then fax machines, and then printers that were attached to the network. Like we've been through all of these changes, and although this one really hit us hard, I've experienced the same thing, seeing people successfully navigating, that digital transformation, even if it was a much harder thing to do, right? And what about yourself, Patricia? What kind of, things sort of struck you about the last couple of years?
I agree with the adaptability that we're looking at. I'm sure that was pronounced properly. I can spell it. I think that, I've often referred in the last 2 years to the office equipment resellers in particular as kind of micro transformers, which sounds like a toy, but they've successfully transformed during all kinds of different technological and political and geo changes that we've experienced, right, over the decades. So they're making little adjustments every single day. And therefore there's quite a resiliency that's been built up within their DNA, I think. And I feel like, yes, we've been hammered right now, but I remember, I'm definitely old enough to remember 2008, 2009. And this feels completely different. A lot of the pain that we're experiencing is really pretty temporary. I mean, and when I say temporary, I don't mean it's going to be gone in 3 months, but in a year, things are going to, the full year from last year at this time to this year at this time looks completely different. We've got all kinds of new issues, but we've managed to mitigate a lot of the issues that we had in the previous year. So I think the next year at this time is going to look completely different as well. And in a way that provides a little bit of comfort, because 2008, 2009 was a literal demand problem. People got laid off in masses and never returned to the workforce. And a lot of the people that got laid off in that period were men in their prime. So we lost an entire layer of people of really men in the workforce from the ages of 40 to 55 that never went back to work. We lost them forever. And that was a very painful time. And it took us this long to get over it. And then, of course, a global pandemic hit. Now the layoffs are different. They're affecting the women more, unfortunately, but they're also in different types of jobs. And we're seeing those people come back, albeit negotiating and leveraging their power to work in some wage increases and better working conditions, right? So we're seeing it's a completely different situation. We're not having a demand problem right now. We are definitely having a supply chain problem. So
Yeah.
that is more of a temporary issue. I know it feels like it isn't, but it is. So I think, long term, we're looking pretty good. I will say that the biggest battle I see on the landscape in the next 12 to 18 months is going to be that hybrid office battle. It's the corporate, especially on the corporate level, how they get their employees back to work, those companies that want them back to work, and what are the employees going to do, and how are they going to leverage their power, and what does that hybrid office look like? And I think that that's maybe the number. We have a list. You asked us to talk about a few topics that we see as important, and we have a list, but the hybrid office is definitely one of the top items on there.
Well, that's great. And I'm glad you bring that one up, right? And supply chain issues for sure, temporary, we will get through it. I'm not sure if you saw the news in Canada and the Pacific Northwest of the US as well, where that atmospheric river, as they call it, ran through. Vancouver is literally cut off from the rest of the country right now. So there are no highways, there are no rail access to get through, right? And talk about adding insult to injury, like, a natural disaster to throw on top of everything for supply chain, yes. But, but at any rate, what you say about this hybrid workforce, it is interesting having these conversations with people, right? So, maybe Amy, you can talk a little bit more about that. What are you seeing with, dealers, OEMs? What kind of conversations are happening around, what's coming for that?
Well, the funny thing is, when I started thinking about this list of trends, I realized they were all going to tie together. Once you can't really talk about one of these things and not talk about the other. And so when I start thinking about the hybrid office, security becomes a big issue with that, because you've gone from these very perimeter-based firewalls and networks surrounding every asset they had to the work from home and everything that was thrown together. And now you're coming into the hybrid, where you've got to really be looking at these tools and software that's able to function anywhere and maintain that security that's necessary. So it's going to create a lot of opportunities and challenges for both dealers and their customers, because the dealers are also going to have to understand security for their own products and workforces. But it's hard to talk hybrid without talking security. But then, of course, there's so much more to it too. It's become this mindset that some struggle with more than others. I think that it's funny. I was actually just looking at a study when Patricia was talking about the how previously it was the older men who were struggling most with the recession.
Not older, just a certain age group.
As someone who I think is in the age group you referred to, let's face it, we're not the kids anymore. But it really is, at this point, it's the women in the workforce who are struggling more. It's the ones who are adapting best to the hybrid workforce, and all the demands right now are the male and the knowledge worker roles. It becomes a problem for some other groups. But so there's a lot of pieces that are going to have to come together for that hybrid workforce to happen. But it's happening. I mean, we've seen, the major tech companies are doing it. Dell, Google, I think name any big company, and they're going towards that hybrid workforce. So it's there, it's happening, like it or not.
And what do you think? Are most dealers looking at saying, yes, we have to have some kind of hybrid environment? Or are they saying we just need to go back to the way things were? What's the gut feel on that one?
I think within the dealerships themselves, there's a hybrid work environment in many of them. It also is geographically dictated a little bit, because the lockdowns and the close downs were different depending on where you lived in this vast country called the United States, right? So I've had the opportunity to be to quite a few dealer meetings this year, and actually even last year in person. So they, the experiences could be very different for someone that works in LA County versus a dealer maybe in Ohio or somewhere in or Texas or Florida, it's been New York and that New Jersey and that corridor were very locked down, but other places in the United States were not. So I think it really depends on where they're located. I think in general, though, that hybrid office is very broad. So are we talking one day a week on a Friday, or are you talking you only come in once every 3 weeks? That I think everybody has a different definition of what a hybrid office is. And I think there's going to be a lot of strife around what's acceptable to the employer and to the employee. And until those get very well defined, I mean, I don't envy the HR professionals right now, because I think that, and along with vaccinations and testing, and it's very problematic still. And I think there's going to be a continuous battle for the next year or so. There will be employers who say, we don't need you to come in, that will change their minds. And there will be employers that say, you need to come in, that will change their minds. And it's going to end up being very colorful.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that it's not going to be a clean experience, that it's going to be like all great change, where it's going to be messy before it gets better.
Yeah, I think so. Amy,
Wow.
I think you had a point.
Well, I was thinking about, though, I don't know, I feel like we're kind of doing the good cop, bad cop thing here, but I was thinking about the opportunities it presents too, as I'm Pollyanna here, with these HR people who are having to come up with new methods for onboarding employees.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of opportunity for workflow and software and those types of products. I mean, they exist, and a lot of organizations are learning how to do that and finding that it's actually not that hard. Now, it's going to obviously be different depending on, your industry and how large or small you are, but it's certainly a product opportunity when it comes to something that most offices are going to need now. So
yeah, and there are incredible tools. And I will say, Wes, so the dealers are struggling with what's going on in their own houses, but I can tell you for sure that what they hope for is that everybody else goes back to the office. Unfortunately, we know that's not what's going to happen, right? So there's going to be something in between. And so the big question is, how many will return to, especially the corporate environment. So we'll see. But I know what they're living through, and I also know what they're hoping for. So,
Yeah,
for the most part.
I know hope is such a wonderful thing, right? But it is funny, the different opinions that you get. And through the top 100 group that I lead, somebody who I really respect at Clover Imaging said, hey, the pages aren't all coming back, right? Just a heads up, and not everyone's going to go back to the office. And it's kind of interesting seeing these kind of frameworks that some of these large organizations are, setting up as well, right? So they may not, marry up entirely with the hope. And I will be the last person in the world to profess to understand which direction it's going to go, right? Like
I don't think anyone knows.
It's incredible, right? I've never felt so, I always love making short-term predictions, and I'm not even touching this one. So, Amy, you mentioned something on the security side, right? And it got me to thinking, you remember the days when we were just talking about letting people into the office with their own devices, right? I have not heard the expression BYOD, bring your own device, in a long time, because it's kind of already been, been there, done that, right? That they've learned how to secure things in, as long as it's in the office. But now we have this complexity that you mentioned, which is taking it off network and putting it in this other network where, in my household, I've got a son who's in university, he's doing classes online, right? I've got a daughter who's in high school, she's doing other things. And then here I am doing a live stream on my network and sharing documents and everything else, right? So it really is getting complex. So hopefully, is that one of the ones that was on your list, is a little deeper dive into what you see for security in the future?
Oh, definitely. Zero trust is the biggest topic right now in security. And I think that's what everybody is going to have to get to, because that's how you're going to manage all of these workers and devices that are all over the place. Is you've got to start centering security around the user rather than the device. And that's what zero trust does. I mean, security is the hot IT topic. It's almost not broken out anymore. It used to be, cybersecurity is a one topic of conversation in the IT conversation. I think it's the conversation right now. And so many companies are providing solutions for that. I think another big one is employee education, because it's not just a matter of having that automated security and multi-factor authentication. You've got to make sure that your employees know what to look for. And that's why we're seeing companies that are doing in person or, video, but like individualized training with these people to teach them, what to look for in a phishing email. It was funny. I was reading about phishing emails and somebody said, it's got to be, it's got to have a hook, and it sounded like the exact description of writing a good marketing email is writing a good
Right.
phishing email.
It's true.
And
right?
it's probably very similar. So you've got to make sure employees know what to look for as well. When they're in the office, out of the office, they're not necessarily monitored by that firewall anymore. And all of the software and tools can be in place, but you've got to make sure that they know what they're looking for as well.
Yeah, this idea of, that zero trust policy. I'm on an MSP group call that I do every Thursday, and I love it. It's at 3:00 every Thursday, just like I did the T100 call every Wednesday, same time. And they're bringing up these issues before sometimes the public even hears about them, right? So I'm feverishly writing notes. And I remember the first time that I heard about zero trust, and of course I had to say, excuse my ignorance, like, what does that mean? And when they explained to me, it was so simple, right? Like this idea that we have to take the approach where we don't trust anything anymore, right? Like that we're assuming everything is a risk. That's how we start. I've noticed as well that on a lot of the applications that I interact with online, instead of passwords now, they're doing different things like sending me codes, or if I, forget a password, instead of resetting it, sometimes they'll say, well, hold on. It's like multi-factor authorization, but even when you screw up and you're trying to just get help, they do that now to us, right? And it's interesting seeing the landscape change. So I wonder, with this zero trust thing, if passwords one day will even disappear, we can all hope, right?
Yeah. And I think they're going away. I mean, we're seeing Microsoft, for example, going towards a passwordless interface. I know they've done it on some of their personal products, and I think they've implemented it in Active Directory and some of their enterprise products as well. Passwords are going to be old-fashioned before you know it.
Yeah, it's something to watch, isn't it?
Yes.
So we've covered security, and you guys said that you did think of a few other things, and I'm curious because we didn't actually share them. So what's another thing that you're looking at for the near-term future in our space?
Well, as we were thinking about this list, we decided if there were five points to discuss, security gets 2.
Oh, yes.
So,
okay.
That just emphasizes the importance of security, right, in everything we're doing. Another thing that is becoming more and more prevalent, and maybe even prevalence, not exactly the right word. I'd say even utilize is business process automation in some form, right? So because of the changing environment and the fluidity of it, and the fact that people are working from anywhere and need access in that zero trust environment to their files and some of the traditional things that an MFP would do, for instance, in scanning, copying, sending folders in different directions. Business process automation software has become very important in the entire chain of work. So more and more, we're seeing automation pieces being utilized, right? And it's not necessarily in its entirety, because it's like they talk about eating the elephant, you don't do it in one bite. So picking the most paper-rich environments and finding ways to automate in those areas first, right? So you can do it in sections. And even when Amy was talking about HR professionals and onboarding new employees and also compliance with different regulations, maybe COVID regulations with testing and vaccinations and things like that, having a digital way to do all of that alleviates an enormous burden And especially when people aren't physically in the office, and all of this is being done from remote locations. So I think business process automation is just going to be a term that we hear more and more and more about in some form. It could be through the use of robotic process automation tools or other automation sequences, but we're going to hear it over and over and over again. And that was the origin of Workflow Magazine, right? And that was a decade ago.
Yeah.
And of course, this existed way before that, right? But we weren't talking about it. So,
well, and like you said, with the introduction of your, publication specifically for that, here we are today, and it's everything, right?
It took way longer than we thought.
Yeah.
We've been waiting 10 years. So.
Hello, flat rate. I know.
Right.
Certain things just have to cook at the right temperature in their own time. It's like barbecue, right? Whenever you go to some place for barbecue, they say, when's it going to be ready? Well, it's going to be ready when it's ready. So
especially when you're really hungry.
Exactly. Oh, that's great. And I love this idea of business process automation and automation of any kind, right? That we're really starting to embrace that. Yeah. I know that one of the other things that has come up in my T100 calls is this idea that people are having a real problem getting service techs back. So a lot of them that were furloughed or whatever, they're actually at that retirement age, kind of what you were talking about earlier. Oh. And they simply say, no, actually, you know what? I'm okay now. I think I got enough to be able to get through this and have fun. And then on the younger side, they can't get any people because they just don't think office equipment's cool, right? So this whole idea that there has to be some process automation for them as well to make up for these bodies that maybe just aren't coming back, right? So I don't know if that's in your list, but for me, it was one of those things where I was like, wow, that's a huge problem, is this talent acquisition, for things that have to get fixed, and people may not want to fix them anymore, right? So
it's a topic at every dealer meeting now. Of course, right? So, and I know you've had some conversations, Wes, with various professionals around that theme, and they're true experts, right? The people that you've been speaking with that are, from a service perspective, know more about the industry than anybody I can even imagine. And you've spoken directly with them about this issue, so they also understand the depth of knowledge to be a good service tech, the depth of experience and knowledge. The more hands-on experience you have with all kinds of different issues is that catalog or that library that doesn't transfer that easily, right? That's part of the problem with these hands-on jobs. And the age of these technicians in the early 60s and later even. I mean, I know there are some in their early 70s actually that are still active, and a lot of that group has retired forcibly sometimes. So because in the beginning, when we first kind of entered the COVID phase, there were companies furloughing people, and then you don't know when you're coming back. So then you start looking at, what does my life look like if I don't come back on the payroll actively, right? So there's migration from those that has now, with the uptick in demand, left a gaping hole. They were already, it was one of our top 5 topics before the pandemic was hiring good people. That came up as one of the top 5 on every survey for the last, I don't know how many years. A lot of that attention was focused around sales. It's always and still an issue, of course, but now we're sitting here and it's really the burning issue is service tech. So a part of it is the hands-on. I mean, one of the things I will say, you were talking about automation and using more of that, the video tutorials. There's ways, I mean, I'm not talking about recruiting right now, but there's also ways to do that, obviously, but using automation tools. One of the things that Amy and I have been writing about quite a bit on the security topics is the influence of AI now in helping ward off attacks in cybersecurity. AI can thwart things on a scale that humans can't, right? So as long as there's a trust in the algorithms and the capabilities, and the machine learning helps make those better and better, our capabilities just increase dramatically. So that scale is amazing, and there may be, with predictive maintenance and some of these other technologies that are being integrated into a lot of the dealerships, that's going to alleviate some of the burden. Obviously not all of it, because we still need people. And obviously it's going to have to be younger recruits that you train, right? So then I think it's just a long, hard slog, but it's a slog we all know, and it's working very closely with universities and technical schools. Even, for some of these jobs, maybe getting into the high schools, and where they once had auto mechanics, right, as one of the trade type things in the high schools. And I mean, I remember learning how to bake brownies. The guys went to that's how old I am, auto mechanics, and the girls went to home ec. Why not office equipment repair? HVAC, office equipment, elevators, escalators, all of these types of things that are really quite comparable. Can we build out those kinds of apprenticeship programs? Maybe. It's a lot of work, but there's enough people in this channel, and the OEMs are large enough to be able to want to support this as well. When you involve production print equipment, think how large that is. Not only size, but as the billions and billions in the production print side of things. I mean, there's some power in that maybe that's an initiative that needs to be developed and talked about more.
I like this idea of, sort of inspiring people at a young age, because it really is a mentorship task, right? It's apprenticeship. It's that kind of learning, right? And that does have to start at those ages where we influence them. And I'm definitely going to chew on that one more, because that intrigues me. It's like, how do you get them interested in this? And like you said, versus HVAC or whatever, like what kind of cool things can our industry, start to do to entice them to bring them in there, right? And because I got to think too that, is there a future where a technician that is, really well versed on how to fix a certain type of output device, because now there's software involved and there's networking and everything else, that if they can kind of get them excited by some of these other things that they might be able to do as those dealerships expand, right? I don't know. But
no, I think so. I think when you start talking about technicians working hand in hand with basically robots, and so involving process automation and machine learning and preventative types of technologies, right? I think that's where it might get sexy again,
right?
And that could be Amy, you mentioned the hook before. That could be one of the hooks, right? Another is obviously pay. It's also a multi-factor decision. So,
well, that's pretty cool. That gave me a lot of thinking points there. So, and it gets me excited. And I never thought I'd get excited by service technician stuff. So there we go. All right. So we've covered security in two ways. We did cover a little bit about hiring and retention. It seems like everything kind of circles back, to that. What else is on your minds? What are you seeing coming down the road?
Well, so we talked about hybrid office also in business process automation. And Amy, what's next on the list, right?
There's just one big trend, West. There's no lists of trends. There's one giant trend, and everything is just lumped into it. Stuff's happening. But one thing that we were discussing was the improved infrastructure. And of course, we've just had this huge infrastructure bill go through, which, by the way, included a ton of money for cybersecurity as well. So there you go again. But we've also, even ahead of that, we already have a hugely improved infrastructure. That was one of the big conversations when we all started going remote last year, was that we couldn't do it in 2008 because the infrastructure wasn't there. We didn't have the broadband or the technology or the bandwidth to be able to handle all of these video calls and all of the meetings and everything that, the cloud infrastructure that needed to happen. Now we have all of that. And what that's doing, especially as it penetrates more and more the rural areas and places that didn't have that connectivity before, it opens up the worker base worldwide in several ways, because not only do you have the ability to hire workers from anywhere in the country, and these workers at the same time have the ability to get jobs outside of their geographical areas that may have limited opportunities, limited pay, You also have the opportunity to train knowledge workers. And again, this gets back to what we were talking with the service technicians. Um, there's more learning abilities, more online learning opportunities for them to go and get certified in things. And again, uh, college itself, university educations have the view of that has changed, and we are getting, especially in the IT world, I think, much more towards specialized certifications being what matters. So when you can get somebody the opportunity to go to CompTIA, say, and take training courses and get certified in things, get the Cisco certifications, you've got employees that are educated and trained and capable of working from anywhere. You've opened up a whole world for both the employer and the employee.
It's interesting what you say about, the tools not being available before, right? And I've been working remotely for 20 years. Even here at the lake, I've lived here for 13 years. When I first moved out here, it was really spotty satellite internet. And then they came out with a 4G thing I put on my roof that shot over to a tower, at another, part of the mainland down the shore. And then finally, here we are today, and we've got Bell 5, and it's like literally the fastest internet I've ever had in my life. Mm-hmm. And that all happened within that time frame, right? So just imagine what's happening in urban centers where things are accelerating much more quickly, right?
This bill is, the point is it's not supposed to just be the urban centers within the United States, right? So the whole point is that we're going to be able to get into those other areas and give people living in more rural areas the same opportunity to be able to work from, be a knowledge worker and contribute. And I think that is going to loosen things up a little bit with the tight labor pool, first of all, right? But think about infrastructure. I mean, yes, really fast networks with the broadband, but even just improving the roads and the bridges, and we're having a supply chain problem right now, right? So any improvements are going to be really fantastic. Air freight, if we can get those airports beefed up a little bit, it is, there are parts of America that don't look first world right now, unfortunately, and this infrastructure bill is really going to be transformational and beefing up what we have available to us. It's going to help business overall. That's going to help our industry and our channel. If we can transport things easily, the airports are working, people have broadband, you can hire somebody in rural Utah think about the technological skills that are in the area of Salt Lake City, right? I mean, there are people, but we can expand that out now. So, this is going to make a huge difference. Now, of course, this all takes time. So, and maybe that the Build Back Better bill that's being looked at, I know those are more of the soft skill type stuff, but there's childcare in there. More women can come back and work. And maybe, I'm not exactly sure, but, is there a provision in there for apprenticeships and funding for that kind of thing that we're discussing? All of those things are really important to us being able to not only recover, but build back better, to improve on what we have. I mean, Canada's in a slightly different situation. I mean, I don't have the broadband that you have, and I live in Las Vegas. So you're on a lake somewhere up north, right? So I don't know. I'd like to have your broadband.
Yeah, I'd like to have it too. I mean, it took a long time, right? But again, it really is like, we don't think of it as infrastructure, but it absolutely is, right? Like for me to get my job done, it is such a strong part of the infrastructure. Education for, kids living in small areas, being able to access things the same way people do in cities and stuff. Yeah, that's a big deal, right?
It is a big deal. So let's see if we can make that happen. I think that'll help some things. I mean, obviously there's, this isn't meant to be a political discussion, right? It's just what's in those bills. I mean, obviously there's the taxes on the other side and all that stuff, but it would be, I think, to alleviate some of the burdens that we're discussing, this is going to be transformational for the United States. So, and that has to be a good thing.
Absolutely. And I love that, we always learn great lessons when times are hard. And I think this pandemic shown us that we need better infrastructure internally, right? Because we're probably going to see a lot less of the global supply chain stuff and maybe more stuff happening within the border, right?
I hope so.
Yeah.
I really hope that there's some kind of a renaissance really in a local, as in, let's just say North America, doing a lot more of it at home. I mean, the pandemic really did put a big fat spotlight on some of the weaknesses in the supply chain, which are around not producing enough of what you need to get through certain periods of time when there are difficulties, right? So trying to fly everything in from Southeast Asia when they're going through their own global pandemic, right. It really complicates things in emergencies. So there's probably a different way we can do things going forward that's going to make us less weak in that way. So
I agree, and that's very exciting. And listen, in respect for your time, what else is on the list? Because we do only have a few more minutes left together. What's sort of your final thoughts on, what we should be looking for in the road ahead?
I think expect the unexpected and be prepared for it. And print can be sexy. Printers can be sexy. I think that's an important lesson, important takeaway here.
I love it. So we're continue to expect the unexpected, right? That, whatever this thing is that we're becoming, we're certainly, I feel anyway, still just on the beginning of that journey, right? And how about you, Patricia?
I actually see a lot of strength out there. So I really like what 2022 is starting to look like. I see a lot of money being spent. And that is being spent on things that are going to be pretty powerful. So I think there's some good times ahead for this channel in our industry. And I know it's hard right now, but it's been hard before. And I think we're shaping up to look pretty good. And hopefully I just hope that spirit of cooperation and helping each other out that I've seen going on with the dealers, especially with the supply chain. And if someone had, these informal exchanges that have kind of developed between different groups of dealers, how people are supporting each other and helping each other out. I hope that continues because I really love that. And it's been really powerful, and it's helped people stay in the game until we can get through this. And if we can continue that with the spending that I see flowing in, I mean, some really solid business spending going on in at least the first half of 2022 is a very good indicator that things don't look so bad. So I'm pretty excited.
Well, I'm with you. I'm very excited as well. And I believe in this channel. And like you said, we're very blessed to be in a channel where a lot of people really do come together to lift each other up and help each other when they need it. And that's a great place to be. So cannot thank you both enough. Speaking of lifting up and giving us knowledge, for being on the show today. So Patricia and Amy, thank you so very much.
Thank you for having us. It was great.
And to all of our viewers out there in Tigerpaw land, I want to thank you for tuning in. If you're watching the program, hope you enjoyed it. If you're listening in as well. And don't forget to visit tigerpaw.com and the resources page for more great learning. And until next time, keep learning.